Boom, I'm in the room. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Everyday Conversations regarding mental health. You're here because there's nothing on the telly. And I'm coming to you live from the old Heale Manor. I've got a great show for you tonight. I really have. Tuesday we have the old live stream awesome quiz. Got another great quiz coming up for you next week. But this show is all about mental health, mental well-being, and taking the stigma out of it. And tonight we're going to look at a different subject, one I've not really looked at before. We're going to be looking at human trafficking. Now, my guest, she's been trafficked 3 times. We're going to find out about that. So, without too much further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest. Good evening, Amanda.
Good evening, Tim. It's so nice to be here. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Now, you've got some sort of story to tell. But let's just start with a little bit of a misconception, because trafficking is not the same as smuggling, is it?
That's correct. So, the Department of Homeland Security defines human trafficking as the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor or sex acts from another person. So, if you notice, there's no mention of transporting a person and there's no mention of money. So, human smuggling is separate from trafficking, and prostitution is separate from trafficking. These all overlap in significant ways all over the world, but one does not equal the other, and they're all separate issues that all need to be addressed. And until we recognize what human trafficking actually is, our struggle to fight against it is going to be difficult.
Yeah. So now we put that out, can you now give us a little bit of a heads up on your story, and then we'll have a conversation around it. So the floor's yours.
Most survivors of human trafficking, or most victims of human trafficking, most of us experience some kind of early childhood abuse. It kind of sets us up to thinking that these kind of abusive situations are normal, and this is what life is. This is what we should expect. I was no stranger to that myself. I was molested the first time when I was 4 years old. Again, when I was 12, 13, 15, 16. I was raped at 17 by somebody I thought was my very best friend. And another common misconception is that here in the US, we believe, for whatever reason, that trafficking can only happen to people under the age of 18. But the first time I was trafficked, I was over the age of 18. I was actually 18 years old. 1/4 of all victims worldwide are under the age of 18. That means the majority of victims are over that age. I was trafficked the first time by a man that I had been dating. He was more than twice my age. And kind of leaving it brief, that man loaned me out as a party favor to his best friend for a birthday party in Las Vegas, Nevada. I didn't tell anybody about this until just a couple of years ago. It was the first time I really spoke up about it. I didn't realize at the time that what I had gone through was considered human trafficking. I just thought that I was being raped. I thought that I was facing domestic violence of an extreme scale. And essentially, that's what it was. I was flown from Arizona to Nevada to Las Vegas and taken to a hotel where the staff was paid to make sure that they didn't come around and start asking questions. And they were told I could get room service once a day. And if I left the room, I wasn't able to get back in because I didn't have a key of my own, wasn't going to be given a key of my own. And the man who had me there in the hotel room, he had my ID card for flight purposes. He said he was going to hold on to it for safekeeping. Essentially, it was used as blackmail. If I left, I had nowhere I could go. I had no friends there. I had no family there. I didn't have a driver's license at the time. I didn't have a car anyway, and I was in a strange city. If I had walked out of that hotel room to go and try to find help, I would have ended up in a worse situation than what I was in. So I had to put up with 52 hours of repeated assaults and rapes. At the end of the 52 hours, as promised, as scheduled, I was taken back to Arizona. And from there, I was able to kind of piece myself together enough to get out. I floated around and was homeless for a little while. I stayed with different friends and different people. Eventually, I found my way down to Florida. And when in Florida, my plan was that I was going to stay with my dad's mother. My grandmother lived down there and had been living there for years. I'd injured myself at work one day pretty badly and was supposed to get surgery on my knee. I needed to have corrective cartilage surgery. My plan was to go down there and stay with her while I got the knee surgery done. And then once the surgery was done, once I was back on my feet, then I would find my own way again. I had a job lined up. I was going to uh, get my own apartment, and I was planning on staying there in Florida. But what happened instead was I got to the Daytona Beach bus station at 10:30 at night, and I called my family to let them know that I was there and just needed a ride to get to their house because I didn't have their address. And instead of my grandmother, her husband, my dad's stepfather, answered the phone and said, "We're not coming to get you. You're on your own. Good luck." And they hung up the phone. I didn't know for years that the reason that that happened was because my family had apparently called them and told them that if they took me in, they would never speak to them again. And so I was 19 years old and left at the Daytona Beach bus station at 10:30 at night with nothing but $5 in my pocket. Like any scared teenager would do, of course, I sat down on the curb and just started crying my eyes out. And a young couple came up and found me. This young couple, they were very kind. They said that they had a place for me to stay. They would allow me to stay there as long as I needed to until I could get on my feet. What they really meant was they were going to allow me to stay there until they could find the highest bidder. They sold me as a commodity, like a bag of potato chips or an extra bed pillow, to a guy by the name of Esteban. I was locked up for 23 and a half hours in a very small room with no food, no water, no means of escape, no bathroom facilities. It took everything I had to remember growing up watching a TV show in the 80s and 90s called MacGyver. And that man could fix anything with a paperclip and a rubber band. I had to be creative. I needed to come up with a way to get out. And through some very creative means, I did finally manage to break out of there. And I got out and I ran. I ran for my life. And he was right behind me. And he jumped in his car and started chasing me down the street. I saw a police officer and I tried to flag her down and I tried to tell her what was going on. And she just looked at me like I was completely insane. It was a rough part of town. It was known as the area where the prostitutes worked. I didn't know that at the time. I wasn't a prostitute. I was a 19-year-old, pretty fairly innocent kid in spite of everything that had already happened to me at that point. But that didn't change her perspective of me. I was a raging lunatic screaming that I needed help at the top of my lungs and looking rather disheveled after 23 and a half hours of being locked up in a small room fearing for my life. But she saw him do an illegal U-turn when she saw him speaking to me, and she went after him. I never went back to see the place where I had been held. I left. I ended up homeless again. I did everything I could just trying to not pay attention to anything on the news. There was a hurricane that blew through. I used whatever I could as a distraction to not pay attention because I didn't want to know if they caught him or not. I saw it as I got out of there. It's not my business anymore. And I regretted that for a long time. I had survivor's guilt. It was terrible, absolutely terrible. I kept on floating around for a while. Eventually, I found my way out to California. And in California, my goal, as silly as it is, was to become an office manager or a personal assistant to somebody very important. I didn't care who that somebody very important was, but that was my goal. I thought that was what my life had kind of led me toward. I had learned through all of this systematic abuse over the years that I was really good at being hypervigilant, which is often confused for empathy. I could predict what it was that somebody was going to need very often, because of that hypervigilance. And I could pay attention to their needs and their wants and their desires and their moods. And really, I was perfectly suited for that kind of a job. Instead, I ended up on Alias and Will and Grace, and I modeled for Harley Davidson. I did a lot of really cool stuff in LA. And I started to build up this little bit of a reputation out there. I became good at what I was doing, but I wasn't happy. About that time is when internet dating became a really popular thing. And I went on to internet dating in, I guess it was 2004. And I met a man there, and he lived out of the country. So right off the bat, we knew that we weren't ever going to have an intimate relationship. It was going to be a friendship, but we got along so well that neither one of us could really deny that we had these feelings for each other. So we stayed in contact and we became these pen pals over the years. We lost contact here and there, in and out, but he was always in the back of my mind. I wonder how he's doing. I wonder how his little girl's doing. We would sometimes set up a Skype meeting where he would be eating dinner while I was eating breakfast. And we would have our meals together and he would talk about how his day was, and I would talk about how my day is going to be, or how the previous day was. And it felt like we were building this kind of family relationship. After 7 years of knowing this man, he came to visit me. I went out to go and visit him. We got to know each other really well. And he invited me to get a fiancé visa and be engaged to him and move to Scotland to go and be with him. And I was so excited. At that point, I had built a career for myself. I was a director of public safety and security for 6 different properties in LA County. I was no longer the assistant. I had one of my own. I worked really hard to get there. I had just gotten an $11,000 a year raise. It was significant. I had gotten raises for every single one of my employees. I worked so hard. I had my own apartment. I had a pair of cats. I had my car paid off. I had everything that I had worked so hard for all those years, including my independence. I had built up these walls to where nobody could hurt me. I didn't want to have a relationship with anybody, but this man just drew me in. I loved him. I would have done anything for him. So I left my job and sold my car and got rid of my apartment, and I jumped on a plane with one suitcase and I flew to Scotland. And I landed there in January of 2011, and the snowflakes that were hitting the windows of the plane were as big around as the palm of my hand. It just completely surprises me to this day how big the snow was in Scotland. It was insane. And I got off the plane. It was freezing cold. And I got all the way out to the lobby area, and he wasn't there yet. He was almost there, but the weather was holding him up. And when he got there, he looked like he was happy to see me, but not in the way that you would expect somebody that you were engaged to be married to be happy to see you. We went out to the car, and he asked me for my passport and my driver's license and my debit card. And he said, "You're not going to be needing these here because I'm going to take care of you. And if you don't need these things, you're more likely to set them down somewhere that you're not going to remember. So why don't I take them, and I will put them in the little lockbox safe that I have at the house. And then if you ever need them, we can just take them out when you need them. But you're not going to need them because I'm going to take care of you." And I bought into it. Hook, line, and sinker. I gave him everything I had. It took him 7 years to get me there, and it took him about 7 days to start trafficking me once he did. Within 7 days, he already had people coming into the house who were there specifically to molest and rape me. I didn't want them to be there. I didn't want to participate in this. And through this, if you break it down through the definition of trafficking, I was being forced and frauded. I used fraud to get me there, and manipulated into complying with what was demanded of me. And what was being demanded of me were sex acts. So the use of force, fraud, or coercion to obtain labor or sex acts from another person is the definition of human trafficking. This is the third time this has happened in my life at this point. I didn't understand why this kept on happening to me, but I had begun studying when I was a teenager, trying to understand this stuff. Within a couple of days, I knew I needed to get out of there. This was getting worse. It wasn't going to stop. It wasn't going to go away. I tried to get him drunk one night. I kept on as that hypervigilance in my brain. I knew he enjoyed his drink. I could tell when he was ready for another one. I could tell when he would be easily manipulated into having another one. And I would pour him another whiskey again and again and again. And I got him very drunk that night. And at the end of the night, I talked to him and told him, if you give me back my debit card and my passport, I can go down to the bank and pull out whatever money I have, and then I can give it to you so that we can spend it. And wouldn't that be great? So he bought into it, and gave me back my identification paperwork, gave me back my debit card, and I was going to use that to purchase a flight home. And I got on the computer the next day while he was at work, and I was looking at flights, and the first emergency flight out of there was so expensive I couldn't afford it. So I looked at the next day. Again, it was too expensive. I couldn't afford it. And I kept doing this for every single day, every single airline. I was going on all of the bargain sites, trying to find anything I could afford. And the first flight out that I could afford was 5 days away. And I knew I could put up with the repeated rapes and assaults for another 5 days, because I had already at that point been putting up with it for 31 years of my life. I was 31 years old. I had put up with this for so long. 5 more days was nothing. I could survive through this for 5 more days. So I bought the ticket, and I only had like $11 left in my account, and I didn't care. I didn't care if I got back to California and I had absolutely nothing in my name, no money, nowhere to go. I had friends. Maybe somebody would let me stay on their couch. I didn't care. I just couldn't stay in Scotland anymore. And people have asked me why I didn't just leave his home and run away to hide for the next 5 days. But you remember what I said about the snow. The snowflakes were as large as the palm of my hand. It was a massive blizzard that year in January of 2011, and the snow didn't melt for a long time. I would have frozen to death, and I didn't know if there was anywhere that I could go. I didn't have anybody that I could trust. So the assaults and the rapes continued to happen leading up to the day of the flight. One of those assaults left me so injured that I ended up with a kidney infection. And this kidney infection led to me ending up in the hospital on the day of the flight, which means I lost that flight. I lost the money I spent on the flight because it was a non-refundable ticket, and I had $11 to my name and no way out. I had no idea what I was going to do, but I got terribly depressed. He found out and I got punished. That's when I first started learning about the effects of sleep deprivation and food deprivation and other forms of what can easily be considered torture. It was awful. I needed to find a way out, and I knew that I was smart enough. I knew that I could figure it out. I just needed to give myself a little bit of time and work harder, work smarter, do what I could, survive, get through it from one day to the next, and keep going. Eventually, I gave up hope. One day I left the house. Back then I was a cigarette smoker, and I had taken one cigarette with me. And I walked down to a very old church, and I sat in the graveyard. There was a headstone with the year 1776 on it, and that's the year of American independence. And I took that as some kind of a sign. And I sat next to this gravestone. And that day, the person that was beneath it was the only friend I had. And I leaned with my spine up against that cold stone, and I cried, and I hugged my knees, and I prayed that anybody would come and find me. And nobody came. Nobody found me. Eventually, I got up and I went over to the porch of the church. And I tried the door, and the door was locked. It was a very old church. And I sat down on the front porch of that church, and again I prayed, somebody please come find me. And nobody came. And finally I got up and I headed to the train station. I was not going to live like this anymore. And I wandered down to the train station, and I got all the way down there to the platform, and I was going to smoke my last cigarette while I waited for the next train to come. I pulled it out and lit it, and another man walked out onto the platform about that time, and he asked me for a light, and I gave him my matches. And he lit his cigarette, and he handed me back the matches, and I tried to tell him I'm not going to need them. And I wanted him to ask me why I wasn't going to need them. Oh, were you going to quit smoking? No, that's not why I'm not going to need them. But he didn't ask. I couldn't make him care. He didn't know me. He wasn't going to get involved. And I had all of these lies circulating in my head. There's no way he's ever going to care about me. He doesn't know me. And then a little boy walked out on the platform and walked up to where his dad was and took his dad's hand, and he looked at me. And when that little boy looked at me, I realized it was the first time in possibly months that anybody had actually seen me. And it scared me and it revitalized me all at the same time. And I got up and I started running, and it took me about 20 seconds to realize that I wasn't running towards the train trying to end my own life. I was running back to what then was my prison, because I knew that if something was going to intervene like that there had to be a bigger purpose for my life. There had to be a reason I was being kept alive through all of this. And I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how I was going to move on from all of this, but I knew I had to find another way. And I fought hard to find it. I was there a total of 5 months. By the time it hit me that, yeah, he's got some training in certain areas of his life. He would know what we used to call Stockholm Syndrome now has been changed and is now referred to as trauma bonding. He would know what this was just as much as I would. But if he knows it that well, then surely I can convince him that that's what's happening. And I went to him one day and I told him, my fiance visa runs out at 6 months, and I've already been here for 5 months. And if I stay here beyond my visa, I can get kicked out of the country and not be allowed to come back. And you could lose your job as a police officer. But if you send me back to Los Angeles, back to California, I can find friends to stay with, and I can stay there for 6 months and then come back here on a different visa. And wouldn't it be nice? Because if I leave on this certain date, I can come back in time for Christmas, and it would be our first Christmas together. And wouldn't that be beautiful? I knew there was no other way that this man was going to let me go. And within 2 hours, he bought me a round-trip flight that would have landed me back in Scotland in time for my birthday. I got on the plane, and I'd always been a nervous flyer before that. But while I was living there in Scotland, I missed the American accent so much that I watched nothing but Law and Order Special Victims Unit episodes and every episode ever created of air crash investigations. That just gave me the fear of flying like you wouldn't believe. But the day that I walked into that plane, onto that gorgeous plane there in Scotland, in the Glasgow airport, I was more afraid of staying than I was of flying. And I got on that plane, and it was my salvation. It was my freedom. 2 years later, I became a flight attendant, and I started traveling the world because I had so conquered that fear. But I hadn't yet conquered the fear of him finding me. So I stayed working for a small regional airline because I couldn't take the chances of flying overseas and ending up back in that area. He was still looking for me. He was hunting me down, and I knew he was. He was attacking me left and right. Every time I got a new job, every time I got a new friend, Every time I started dating somebody new, he would set up a fake email address and send all these photos and videos of me being raped and molested to these people. I lost jobs. I lost friends. I had rumors everywhere, all over the city of Los Angeles, and it was all I could do to fight back. I tried to go into hiding. I shut down all of my social media, and I became this recluse. I was tired of being found. I was tired of this stuff getting out there. I was terrified that it was going to keep getting out there. Eventually, I left LA. I left being a flight attendant, and I packed up a car and I moved to Colorado in 2016. I needed a new start. I needed to get away from the past, but you don't really escape the past, especially trauma. It stays with you. And as long as it stays with you, this is something that you're going to continue going through. As long as you don't learn how to fight back against these trauma reactions that you are creating and building and reinforcing, you're going to have these things that you're going to be facing forever. And in 2019, I found out that he had made me famous on a pornography website with all of these photos and videos again, showing up on a porn site. A very dear friend of mine let me know about it. And I was recognized in a grocery store. Not from being on Will and Grace or Alias or modeling for Harley Davidson or any of the really cool, amazing, and fun things that I had done that people would normally be recognized from. I was recognized for a rape video on a porn site. It destroyed me. I immediately reached out to an anti-trafficking organization out here in Colorado. They paired me up with a legal team that was able to, through pro bono work, reach out to these different pornography websites and start fighting this stuff and having this stuff pulled down. But every time one came down, two more went up, and it would have my links to my social media information and my personal contact information, and people were finding me. People could drive directly to my home and find me. And it was terrifying knowing that all of this information was out there, and he was still winning this war. He was still fighting me. I had given up fighting so long ago, and I started seeing a therapist. The first therapist, I'm not kidding you, I traumatized this woman so bad that I'm pretty sure she left the industry completely. But then I got a second therapist, and she was amazing. She had already worked with several other survivors of human trafficking. And I told her, look, this is the kind of person I am. Don't sugarcoat it. Tell it like it is, and pull no punches, because otherwise we're not going to get through this. And she got the message. Within a year and a half, we had gone through several different forms of therapy, including tapping and EMDR. I had recalled things that I had long since forgotten. And I was finally ready to start something that I had wanted to do, but was always terrified to do. And in November, she asked me, she said, I think we're coming to kind of the end of our therapy. I just wanted to check in with you and see how you're feeling about all of this and see what's next for you. What are your plans? What are you going to do next? And I told her, I said, I think I'm ready to finally write my book. And she said, oh, that's great. Right now it's November. So we'll take a break through Christmas. We'll get through the holidays. If you need me, I'm here. But I'll check in with you again in early January and see how you're doing. Does that work? I said, not a problem. Sounds great. So in January, she reached out to me and she said, so how's it going? I said, I'm doing really well. She said, fantastic. Have you started writing your book yet? And I told her, Amy, I'm done. I wrote the book. It's 350 pages, but I wrote the book. And she went, are you kidding me? Don't you still have a full-time job? Amy, I've got 2 full-time jobs. How did you write a 350-page book in a matter of a month? Well, when you're finally ready to get the stuff out of your system, it comes pretty easy. She said, well, what are you going to do next? I told her, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. She said, why don't you try painting? You're really good at being creative. I think painting would be a really great way for you to be able to get a lot of this stuff out of your system too. I tell her, I said, I don't know how to paint. I've never painted other than doing finger paints and watercolors when I was a kid, and I always looked like trash. So I don't know how to paint. She said, well, I'm going to send somebody over with canvases and paints and paintbrushes, and I want you to just try. Within 3 months, I had sold my first piece. It was made into prints, and those prints were then sold by an anti-trafficking organization that had helped me to help raise funds to help other survivors of human trafficking. And by June of that year, June of 2021, that was my 10-year anniversary of freedom from Scotland, my 10-year anniversary of freedom from human trafficking. That was when I painted the painting right here behind me. This is a print of the original. The original is hanging in a home for human trafficking survivors in Chicago, Illinois. And the Chicago Tribune wrote an article about the painting and about the release of my autobiography, Custom Justice. People ask me all the time why I named the book Custom Justice. And it's because even though I reported the things that had happened and I reported what had been done to me, nothing was done to them. I will never have legal justice. But my custom justice came when I learned how to speak up for myself and how to have the strength to carry on through everything that I had faced. Through the writing, through the artwork, through all of these amazing things that I've been able to do and accomplish over the last few years, I have been able to heal enough that the month after my 10-year anniversary of freedom was the month that I met the man that is now my husband. Our wedding was in January of last year. I couldn't have asked for a better man. He says I'm the only person on the planet that's ever accused him of being a patient man, but he really is. And God knew that that was the kind of man that I needed in my life. And that kind of brings me to modern day.
Wow. I don't know what to say. You've rendered me fairly speechless. What
That
a
just happened.
story. What a story. And the bit that really that I find difficult is when you tell the authorities and they do nothing. This guy in Scotland, a law officer, he should know better. But I guess because he's surrounded by like-minded people, obviously, and we see it a lot in this country. I mean, we've had the trafficking of young girls, particularly sort of Rotherham. One springs to mind. Hundreds and hundreds of teenagers that have been, I guess, trafficked. And it shouldn't happen in this day and age. It's and for the authorities to turn a blind eye is just wrong.
Right.
And
And
there should be some sort of redress against these people.
there should be. When I did report him, it was one of the most difficult things that I ever did. I got out of there in June, and by August is when he was attacking me already. So I had written to them. I found out who his supervisors were at his police station, and I reached out to them by email and let them know kind of briefly what had happened. And they asked me for details. And when they asked me for details, I wasn't ready for that. My brain was a Swiss cheese of trauma at that point. There were a lot of holes that I didn't want to remember. I had had a lot of alcohol when I was there because I was trying to achieve a blackout drunk because I didn't want to remember anything at all. But I never actually got there. So what I was left with was puzzle pieces. And in my correspondence with them, I tried to put these puzzle pieces together so that I could make them make sense. And they were asking me for specific dates, specific names, very specific information for witnesses. And I didn't have any of that information. He had used a dating website, ironically enough, called Plenty of Fish to be able to traffic me, to put me out there as available so that these people could be anonymous. They would come in, I would know their first names only because it wasn't my place to know their last names. I don't think he ever knew their last names. They would come in, they would abuse me, and then they would leave. And it became this revolving door. I never got to know any of them really. And I'm terrible with names anyway. So most of the names I did forget. I did remember one or two, and I would give them those names, and I would talk about certain physical attributes about them that were unmistakable. But that wasn't enough for them. So a couple of months after I had initially reached out and we had begun this correspondence, I finally got a letter in the mail from them. And I still have that letter to this day. And the letter says that they see no physical proof of any abuse. It was covered up. They claimed they did a full investigation, and it was swept under the rug. I even sent them the photos and the videos that had been sent to all these different pornography websites and to friends and to bosses and to relatives. I sent them all of this stuff. And in the photos, he is identifiable, even though he had originally blurred his own face out, because in his drunken rage, a couple of times when he sent them out, he had very identifiable and distinguishable tattoos on his arms that he had not blurred out. It was obvious who this person was, and they still covered it up.
That's outrageous. But there again, it's corrupt, and the police force at the moment, there's so much corruption in the police force, not just in this country but across the world, really. I mean, right. I guess you see it in Canada, you can see it in America. And all the third world countries.
If they have police, they're probably
endemic,
corrupt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's good and bad in police everywhere.
Oh, absolutely. They're not all bad.
There really are those people who get into it because they want to help other people and they want to have a positive impact. Yeah. But then there's people like the guy who did this to me, who I don't know if he ever had pure intentions. He knew that he could manipulate people and he could get what he wanted by having that badge.
You just got to wonder how many other people that he's done it to, how many other women he's done it to. You couldn't have been the first.
No, I don't believe I was. He did brag about having another American girlfriend living with him for a while before I had moved over there. I believe she probably went through the same thing. And if I was the first, I don't believe I was the last.
Do you think he's probably still doing it?
I do.
Then something should be done then. But there again, Scotland is fairly corrupt at the moment. You've only got to look at the political system that they've got up there.
Yeah.
And what's going on with that?
I mean, it's a beautiful place, but I'm good with not going back.
It's a horrible place. I don't like Scotland. It's full of midges that bite and they stockpile real estate and it's always wet and horrible up there.
That's very true. June was beautiful. I left on the sunniest day there was.
There's an omen there, I'm sure.
Oh, absolutely. Maybe several.
Absolutely. So, Amanda, tell us a bit about your book and where people can find it.
So all of my books are available through Barnes & Noble online. They're also available through my website. I will sign them and send them out personally. My website is growthfromdarkness.com. They were available on Amazon and they still are for Kindle, but the paperbacks are not available through Amazon anymore. Those were a limited run. I do have currently 13 books. My 13th was just published on June 1st. It's my cookbook called Surviving in the Kitchen, Recipes for Life, Love, and a Full Stomach. And the reason I titled it that is because as trauma survivors, we have this need for a sense of control. 90% of our world around us, we have no control over. But one area where we do have a sense of control is when we're working with recipes. And when we have this creative outlet, when we have a paintbrush on the paper, when we have a pen in our hands, when we're creating something from us, we have that control. And that helps us to process through and to understand our own feelings and emotions. I can put a quarter and an extra quarter cup of flour into a recipe if I want to. I can't always do that with an irate driver on the road that's trying to hitch a ride in my tailpipe.
So, right, your books then, 13 books.
13. My
13
gosh.
books. Right, now, how do you go about doing your book when you've got the same, similar to me, a little bit of dyslexia going on? Do you get somebody to proofread it, to correct your spelling and your grammar?
Tim, I got an editor on speed dial. I have one of the best editors on the planet. Her name is Vicki Warner, and I've known Vicki since high school. And she was the key editor on my autobiography. And when she was reading it and going through it, she kept on reaching out to me through text message and going, I had no idea. I knew you were going through stuff back in school, and I knew you were going through stuff in 2011, but I had no idea. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up and say something. When you're going through trauma, it's normal to have people not step up and say something because we get really good at hiding it. But
Yeah,
she has been absolutely incredible with the editing of pretty much every book that I have. And I love putting her name on that first page. She's earned it.
absolutely. I mean, dyslexia is quite. It can be quite a difficult thing. I mean, one of the things I find really difficult is to read out loud.
Yeah.
And I think that comes across every week on the quiz show.
But
Because you
I
can read
I use
something and
this
what you're reading is totally different to what's on the
right.
page.
And I've known many people who are public speakers and read out loud that have dyslexia. And from what I hear from most of them, they kind of use the same techniques that I use. We just memorize it.
See, I got a memory like a sieve. I,
That's not going to
I
be very
couldn't
helpful.
I couldn't be an actor. I couldn't follow a script 'cause I could never remember all the words.
Yeah, I think a lot of those guys just remember what it is that they need to say for that one scene and then they forget it instantly. And I still don't understand how they do that either.
Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, we've got some comments coming in here. Look, let's pull this up. so, so Eagle VP says you do really well on your quiz, Tim. Thanks. I know.
Aw.
I do try. What's she say? It does not surprise me, and to think he may still be a serving officer.
As far as I'm
Corruption
aware, he
all
still is.
around us. Yeah, it's amazing that it goes on. I mean, is he of an ethnic persuasion, or is he a Scot?
Oh, he's about as pasty pale as I am.
All right, so he's a ginger, is he?
Close
Ginger,
enough. Sandy
ginger
blonde
with a
hair.
skirt. So,
I like you, Tim.
I know I could be really funny at sometimes. So, so nowadays you're doing extremely well. I mean, you've learned to love yourself. I guess you've turned the corner. You've managed to put all of this trauma behind you, and that's a feat in itself.
Yeah.
And it takes a hell of a lot of courage to be able to do that.
Well, and there's a little bit of a misconception there too. I look and I sound and my writing proves that I've got it all put together now. I'm all together. What a lot of people don't see is the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. So I'm very straightforward with this kind of stuff when it comes to my social media. I talk about my health struggles because all of this stuff is related. Right now, I'm dealing with and have been dealing with every single day for the last 3 months chronic hives. This is more than likely an autoimmune disease that can be linked to severe trauma. But so can my Crohn's disease and my thyroid disease. So I've got these three things that are constantly fighting back against me, no matter how well I've been able to piece my brain back together and retrain it to stop reacting to these trauma responses. I still have to deal with all of this nasty crap that comes up. So I sound like I got it all put together. I look like I got it all put together, but the struggles are going to be lifelong. And people need to be aware of that.
Yeah.
It's thyroid disease and Crohn's disease. These are invisible illnesses. These are things that zap your energy and make you feel drained. And sometimes when you wake up in the morning, you just want to roll back over and go straight back to bed.
I know that feeling.
It's like,
I get that most mornings.
that's just called retirement.
Yeah, I know. I love being retired. It's great. It's just,
I wouldn't know how.
what am I going to do today? Oh, I was turn over and have another half an hour. And then the ship's cat decides that it's not time to turn over and have another half an hour. I want feeding, get up. So from your perspective, where are you going from here? Where do you see your life going now? You're fairly well settled. You've got a great husband. So what's the future hold for you, Amanda?
I have just recently taken on the brand new position of being the campaigns manager for a charity organization out here called Shamrock Way. And I'm going to be a public speaker at battered women's self-defense classes. I'm doing public speaking tours. I'll be building homes for the homeless down in Mexico later on this year. I get to take my husband with me on all of these amazing journeys, and I am officially a trauma recovery mentor, now helping people one-on-one to retrain their brains to get away from these trauma reactions.
Fantastic. So what I'll do is I'll put all the links down in the description, and if people don't want to watch this, they can listen to it on their favourite podcast app, because it'll be up on the podcast within the next hour or two. So Amanda, you have been a terrific guest. Your story has really, really been amazing, and I'm really humbled to have you on my show.
Thank you very much. It's been such an honor getting to hang out with you for a little while and look at your gorgeous uniforms in the background.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much. Again, if you'd like to hang about, we'll have a quick chat.
Yes.
Well, what can I say? I'm still struggling for words. What an amazing guest, Amanda. Please follow her on her social media. Look at her books, and I'll put all that down in the description, and that'll be ready to go shortly. So until Tuesday for the quiz, got another great quiz coming. The old Duchess herself, Lady Heale, she's been hard at work putting the quizzes together, and I just got to deliver it. Or until next Thursday, where we do it all again. So until next week, TTFN, ta-ta for now.